Hi everyone, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. Before we bring on tonight's guest, if you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. If you've had a Sasquatch sighting and would like to be a guest on Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, please go to bigfooteyewitness.com and submit a report. All right, let's bring on tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is Connor Flynn. Connor, welcome to the show.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. We appreciate your time. Connor, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Wow, where to begin? Well, I'm Connor, and I'm from Ohio. I live in Florida now, in the Panhandle swamps. But originally, when I moved down to Ohio, I lived in Central Florida in Lakeland. And that was an interesting story of how I got down there. But originally, I lived in Ohio for 24 years. I fish, I hunt, I hike. I'm a sports referee, and I worked at video stores and supermarkets growing up. And I always just loved adventures. I watched scary movies and tagged along with my dad, who's a fireman, riding along to emergencies in the fire truck growing up. So I've always had like this adrenaline pumping in me. And growing up near Lake Erie and the Lake Erie Monster, being surrounded by the Ohio Grassman, it fueled my fun for cryptids, and it's been a nonstop marathon since then.
It sounds like it. From what I understand, talking about nonstop, you had an experience with an unusual creature near Wheeling, West Virginia that wasn't a dogman. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, we always called it like the bear cat, but if you actually look up a bear cat, it's a small creature that lives like in Asia. This was like a bear, saber cat type creature, and it was very interesting how it happened. We hiked hundreds of miles, thousands of miles down the Ohio Valley, scouting hunting trips and following my grandpa, building things, putting up fences for his farm. And me and Jake were hiking a couple months before hunting season, and we were with my grandpa's two blue heelers, Shep and Joey, and then we were with my dog, Seiko, who's a black lab. And we finished up our hike, and we got to this tree fort. That's one of the bigger tree stands on the property, and the grandkids used to play in it a lot. And we were just like laying on a bank, losing time. We were probably there for like 20 minutes just talking, throwing stuff, messing with the dogs. And then the dogs started acting really funky and looking up in the trees. And then suddenly this black thing just drops down on us. And it kind of looked like it had mange and like definitely a feral animal. Jake said it was as big as Seiko, who was a black lab. I just remember it being big and black. And now that more things have really unwrapped about all these creatures, and I've heard about wild things, wild men, and things in between, I really think it was something different than just a panther or a feral cat. This was some strange cryptid. But we ran up the bank, and the dogs surrounded the strange animal, and we're letting out weird howls and barks and going after it. And we waited past the fence, and after a few minutes, the dogs ran up and had a crazy look on their face. And my grandparents weren't really surprised. I'm pretty sure they know what's on the property. They've seen strange things, and definitely bobcats and big cats like panthers. But I really don't know what it was, but it sparked a huge interest. And me and Jake have had a handful of encounters, and that was just one of them. But the one that we had with the Dogman, with the Wolfman of Sleepy Hollow, was the one that forever changed my life.
Oh, I can understand why it would. And speaking of that encounter, you referred to the dogmen you saw as being werewolves. Do you think dogmen are people who have transformed into the form of a beast, or do you think that it was a creature that looks the way it does 24/7, 365?
I think there's different types of dogman. There's different species of these creatures, because I've had encounters with giant, big black dogs that I don't think have really any man-like abilities. But then we've also had these encounters with it has structure and shoulders kind of like a man. So I think there's different versions of these. And then there's Cajun legends that talk about men transforming after sinning. And then, of course, the traditional legend after a man is bitten by a wolf, he turns into a wolf man, into a werewolf. So I think there's many different tales of this. But in my occurrence in Wheeling, in the Ohio Valley, I think that was one of those creatures that was just like a demon dog, maybe a juvenile demon dog. But my encounter with the Wolfman in Sleepy Hollow, I think he actually had some man-like abilities and definitely had conscious ability to think and put things into our mind. So I really think he was more intelligent than us, more in tune with Earth than us. So I think there's different types of these creatures, Vic.
If the Wolfman you encountered actually was a werewolf instead of a dogman, then yeah, that makes it even creepier of an experience.
Definitely, man. I would love to dig into the story of his life and saw what happened and where it went wrong, and maybe if he has local ties to people I grew up with or maybe my own blood. It would be very interesting.
Well, I don't think that werewolves are reality, but I guess anything's possible. You never really know what's out there. If dogmen can be real, then it's hard to say what can't be real. But having said that, when you and your friend Alex were kids, he told you about something strange he had experienced while laying in bed at night. Please talk us through that.
Yeah, man. My buddy Alex used to hear an owl sound, and he actually used to tell his parents when he was a young kid that it sounded like a man impersonating an owl. And now hearing thousands of stories about Dogman and Bigfoot, wow, that fits right in that category. And when he told me that, it sent chills up my spine. It sent chills up my spine saying it right now, that he had multiple encounters, maybe hundreds of encounters over the years with these creatures. And maybe this wolf man had a family or a pack out there, and maybe ones that weren't friends to him as well, because there are many caves and cliffs in that area, and it might be home to many different type of monsters.
Yeah, with a bunch of caves and cliffs like that, it's a perfect place for them to hole up, so you just might be right. Your first dogman encounter happened when you were 13, but your buddies, Alex and Jake, they had their encounters a couple of days before you had your first one. Did they tell you about their encounter before the night when you saw the dogman with them?
Yes, they told me about it many, many times, because it was months before. It wasn't just days before. It was months before. So they definitely mentioned it countless times in ways of joking and then serious matter, that they were telling me that monsters exist, because they knew that I was interested in that kind of stuff, and that I would be spending the night in that area come golf season. So they were actually warning me.
Well, thank goodness they did. Your encounter happened close to a street with a unique name. Please expand on that for us.
Yeah, it took place near Sleepy Hollow, which is famous for the headless horseman and unknown creatures that lurk in the dark. And it makes me think, what history does it hold? That exact area used to be home to a drive-in theater and a swimming hole. There's an abandoned swimming hole with a big cement block where they used to have the diving board out of. And I'm big on thinking these creatures follow sacred lines and historical markers. They follow the ley lines, the pressure points of Earth, and the Indian mounds, the same trails as everybody they follow. So I believe that they have congregated towards these sacred areas with caves and cliffs, because not many areas in Brunswick have caves and cliffs, but the plateau that Sleepy Hollow is on holds many mysteries, and a lot of water, creeks, lakes, and just dense forests that can hide monsters, because many people don't go back there, just teenage kids, really.
With a creepy name like Sleepy Hollow, that sounds to me like that road's a good place to stay away from.
Definitely. It was always a thing when we were growing up. We were really scared of Sleepy Hollow, because when you're growing up, you think that Sleepy Hollow is the only Sleepy Hollow. You're not aware that there's thousands. That Elm Street in your city is Freddy Krueger Elm Street.
Oh no, I get it. I understand. Yeah, it seems like every town of appreciable size has a road like that. All right, Connor, please tell us about your encounters now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
All right. Well, it was when we were young teenagers, and first and foremost, my buddy Jake and Alex had an encounter on their way home going to Sleepy Hollow with this guy named Andy, who's a fireman. and they were driving home and they witnessed a deer-like creature crossing the street on two legs, and then it climbed up a hill and scaled it within seconds and then hid behind this red barn. And that hill would have taken minutes for a normal human being to scale. And recently I had them type up a report for me, and so I'll let their words explain it. First is Alex. Well, I guess my statement would be, I take a left on the Sunrise Oval off of Sleepy Hollow Road. As we pull in, we stop because we think there's a deer crossing the road. When we look, though, it wasn't a deer. It was something on two legs that ran across the road faster than the average person could run. It ran up a hill in almost a gallop. And then Jake wrote, pulling into Sleepy Hollow neighborhood, woods to the left, big field hill to the right, with the red barn at the top of the hill. As we're pulling in slowly, we see a figure crossing the street on two legs, resembling a werewolf Bigfoot, bigger than any human, and as soon as it crosses the street, it dead sprints up towards the barn, running faster than humanly possible. It still feels like a dream. And when they talk about that, it's been the same story over the years, and that's always just been so chilling, because I've driven past that same bend on the street, and I imagine him going up the road, going up the hill, and hiding behind the barn, and it's just chilling. But then my encounter happened a couple months later behind Alex's house. And just to introduce it, Alex wrote, second story, I believe you were there, but we heard rustling outside my walkout basement. We looked out the window and there were eyes like 5'5" to 6 foot looking into the window, taller than any known Ohio animal could stand. And that pretty much says it right there. But I truly believe that the creature could have been anywhere from 5'5" to 12 feet tall, because it was down in a den that was below us. And this thing was eye level or above us. So the thing was massive. But I was sleeping over my buddy Alex's house, and we were really excited because we had golf in the morning, and Alex's family was really well off, so everything was really decked out, and I was just excited to be there. And Jake and Alex grew up right next to each other, so they were best friends, and they're both like my best friends separately. But, you know, it's an interesting dynamic, and Jake and Alex have been together for years on end, and they've explored those woods and been through it so much. But I was a newbie, I was a newcomer, so I was just excited to be there. And we were down in his basement shooting pool, and they've been teasing about the Wolf Man, and we were watching scary movies. We ended up watching Saving Private Ryan. That was always their movie to watch. But they were teasing about the Wolf Man, and after a while we're playing pool and we get this strange feeling, and Alex describes it as rustling outside, but I believe it was just inside us. It took us over by vibrations, and we start creeping around, and we turn the lights off to the basement, and there's a walkout glass. So we're totally vulnerable. So we're creeping and peeking, and I peek out a small window, and we're all packed right by the small window, and we see this creature. And Alex says he saw its eyes, but I just remember seeing its silhouette with just huge ears, like pointed ears, and muscular build, just staring at us. And I was lost in a gaze that just taken over by a trance. Time stopped, and it didn't really bother me. Like I wasn't terrified in the exact moment. I was just frozen. I didn't think he was threatening me or anything, because it could have took us by then. It was just, I think, just interested, you know, three young males having a good time, joking around, jumping around, making weird vibrations and noises. He was just interested. It could have been another teenage wolf man. Looking back at it now, you know, if it was a more alpha, the dad of the family, maybe he wouldn't have had time for that. But maybe it was just another teenage, younger creature. It's very interesting. Maybe I always looked at it like it was the same creature that Jake and Alex saw, but maybe ours was a younger version of it. But regardless, after we first saw it, we locked eyes. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably only a couple seconds. We dash and hide behind like the bar and in the stairwell, just and freeze. We were so scared. It was right there in his backyard, right in the den, probably 40 yards into the backyard. There was a decent distance, but I'm guessing it was the moon was out because we could see him pretty clearly down there. And it was just so bone chilling. But after a while, we, eased back into the basement. And then when it was time to sleep, I remember just being curled up in a ball, thinking about that creature still being out there and just being so frozen and so scared that and it must have been all of us. And I'm not even sure if we were talking or anything. But after a while, we ended up going up to Alex's room on the top floor. So we went basement to top floor to sleep before our early golf league in the morning. And it's so crazy. And we look back at it like, oh, was it a dream? Did that really happen? And yes, it really happened. Yes, it forced us to go upstairs. Yes, it was watching us. It was so bone chilling. And I asked Alex if he had any more, face-to-face encounters, but he didn't. And looking back now, all the owl calls and maybe things that they didn't presume to be the Wolfman, the Dogman, or Bigfoot type creatures, it might have been, just strange occurrences throughout the neighborhood. And my friend Kaylee, who's a family friend and clairvoyant, she lives on the other side of Sleepy Hollow, but same woods, they all connect. Her and her emo friends have encountered a witch in the woods and many apparitions. So according to like skinwalker legends and ancient tribal culture tellings of stories, these Wolfman creatures have special abilities. So I am not entirely sure if it all connects, but those woods are definitely sacred ground. That soil is stained with history, and I would love to dig into it. And I would love to go into those dens with protection and check out those caves and cliffs, and to check out the drive-in theater now and, the swamp around the old swimming hole. It just would be so interesting. And when I make it back to Ohio, I will definitely get my way over there.
You just said that those woods are stained with history. Do you know if any Native American burial grounds were in that area?
Well, Ohio is king of the mound builders. There are more than 10,000 burial mounds in Ohio, or 10,000 Indian mounds. Not all of them are burial mounds. But there are a couple known ones in the area, but none that are specifically laid out in that area. But over the past decades, it has been known that they have been leveled while they've been excavated, because there's not always been a lot of respect for the Indian culture. And especially, in the early days, they did not care at all. And that would stir up the area vibrations even more. But the Mohicans and many Indians were in the area, and they were forced by the Removal Act to leave. So I think the soil is just getting some retribution to the ancient times.
Yeah, you just might be onto something there. Do you think there was any way that your friends could have pranked you into thinking that you saw a dogman that night?
I don't think they were capable of it because it was too late in the night. They could not have perpetuated a hoax. But the power of thought and getting me to believe that they saw a creature definitely could have made me hallucinate. But the feeling in the air, they were terrified too. There was no hiding it. They were changed forever. But it is possible. I of course will admit that, but I know for a fact that it changed them forever.
Oh, I'm sure it did. You said he wasn't doing a very good job of hiding himself. Did you get the impression that maybe he wanted you to see him?
Yes, I definitely do, because he put some kind of vibration in the air and let us know, because we felt it. And Alex says he heard rustling in the leaves, so he let himself be known. We knew right where to look. We knew what overswept us, and I think we asked for it. And I've done a lot of research into like meditation and psychedelics and people going through strange methods to bring these creatures nearby. And we were young teenagers, but we were interested. We were ready. No one's ready for that, but we knew there was something else out there. We were not a square. We we could meet them halfway, and I think that they picked up on that. And I also think that they watched Jake and Alex's brothers wander in the backyards many times, so they knew we were not a threat. And maybe they were interested in me. Maybe they knew that it was new vibrations coming and just checking me out, and I was aware of them, and they could pick up on that. Maybe it's all just the stars align and coming together, but it really changed my life, and it set me on this path that I'm still running with now. So in a way, I'm very thankful for it. And it also woke me up to safety in the woods too, even though I still acted a fool for many years after that. But now I'm look back and reflect and really realize that I was very lucky, because we could have been just on the back patio, throwing the football around at that hour, and it could have been a lot closer call than behind the clear glass.
Well, something I don't want you to lose sight of is you weren't any more in danger inside that basement than you would have been out back throwing the football around. If I wanted to get you guys inside that basement, it could have done so every bit as easily as it could have gotten to you in the backyard. So, yeah, please don't lose sight of that. But having said that you saw its eyes glowing, of course, but you said other than that, you said you saw it in profile only. Did you ever see it move any of its body parts while you were looking at it?
Not really. I could see it from about the shoulder up because it got too dark downward. But really, the shape and just the feeling took me over. And I can't visualize the eyes now, but I just remember being set in a trance and mentioning the eyes. But I just remember the silhouette just being so overwhelming to me that, like, oh my God, there it is. There's the creature. And it wasn't just a normal dog, because I was expecting just a big black dog or like a Great Dane. But this was not a normal dog. This thing was standing up on two legs with the other two just, I'm guessing, just to the side. It didn't have it up. It wasn't showing its claws. It didn't show its teeth or anything. Just its stance and posture, and just, it was just there. The stature was there. And like they say, all the sounds just erase in the forest. We could not hear through the door, but I'm guessing that everything was just standing still, because I felt like time was standing still and I was inside a house. So it's just crazy about, maybe is it telepathy or hypnosis, or does it really just vibrate you on the level of protons and neutrons and electrons? And when you go into wave and particle form, most of the time we're particle form, but do they have the ability to put us into waves? And it's really far out. And I think it defies science and defies everything. And that's why there's such a cover up, just because they can't admit that these things really exist, because it would just shut down the world.
Yeah, it definitely would. Did it ever give you the impression that it was going to charge those doors that night?
No, not physically, but mentally, every single outcome ran through my head. I visualized it tearing me apart. I visualized it taking me off into the den. Everything happened all at once, but it just stood there and just stared at us. So it didn't make any charge, no bluff charges, no nothing, but just its stature just overwhelmed us and took everything. And I think maybe he let us know what he could do with that wave of energy. And then in that pause of moment, we broke the gaze and luckily ran to safety. But like you said, he could have ripped the door down and took everybody in that house, everybody in the neighborhood, if he wanted to. But clearly there's good ones and there's bad ones, and they have some kind of conscious ability to make decisions.
It's good that you realize that. Another time when you were in the Honey Island swamp, you saw something unusual. Please tell us more about that.
Yeah, man. A couple months ago, I was in the Honey Island swamp while I was visiting Biloxi and New Orleans, the king of haunted places. And it was a bucket list of mine that I had to see the Honey Island swamp, because I was a huge fan of the Hatchet series, Hatchet 1 through 3, and then Victor Crowley, the fourth movie. Victor Crowley is a giant mutant man that kills everybody and anything that comes into the Honey Island swamp. So I think it has a lot to do with the Honey Island Swamp Monster and the Rougarou legends, which is a werewolf. And the Cajun legend says after a man sins for 7 years straight, he can turn into a werewolf. And of course, every guy laughs and says, "Oh, I'm not a werewolf yet." But I think there's more to it, you know. But there is definitely sacred soil in that swamp. That place is filled with Indian mounds and strange things and places. There's pyramids in the Honey Island Swamp that no one wants to talk about. And there's a space testing area right on the outskirts of it. So I know that weird things are happening in those trees. But I was doing the 2-hour boat ride tour and looking for gators, and I mentioned to the captain that I'm really interested in the Rougarou and Bigfoot. So I said, please take us to the hot spots and, you know, mention what you can. So he was really, really happy to spice it up. But we located this strange looking bloated carcass creature, and it was about 7 to 10 feet long, and it was tan and translucent skin, and you could see the veins popping through it. And I have 2 good pictures of it on my Instagram, Bigfoot Anonymous. It's a page I run that I've been really taking a lot of pride in and running with this year. But there's 2 pictures that I got as close as I could. I was begging the captain to go over there, but there was kids crying because it smelled so bad, and the parents were trying to cover them up and trying to wish them away, go and get them to the other side of the boat. And I was just trying to hang over the edge, trying to get a video and talk about it. And it was crazy, but you could smell it from about 20 yards away. And I thought it was a deer, but the captain said it was a gator. But you can clearly see that it's tan and brown, and you know, gators are green. And I believe that the deer, the carcass, would have been dominated by all the gators. There's thousands of gators in the area. Why would they not have eaten the deer carcass? So I believe that either it was killed by the Honey Island Swamp Monster, or it's a hybrid of the Honey Island Swamp Monster, or it's something way different, like a space mutant, because they're doing all this space testing, and some of these guys have quit from the space agency and then moved deep into the Honey Island Swamp, and then are very paranoid and shoot their guns at people that come after and onto their property. So it's so crazy that there's so many hidden mysteries. And I asked the captain once we got back what he really thought it was, and he says, to tell you the truth, I don't know. So he was just telling me a gator just to, calm the crowd on the boat. But I want anybody to be a judge for it. The picture's on my Instagram, and the picture is also in my new book, Big Brother Bigfoot, in the Honey Island Swamp Monster chapter. And there's also a very other interesting picture that I got that I took a bunch of pictures on that tour, and a couple of late nights I just, scroll into it and zoom and try to look for faces. And there's one picture that I get that looks like it's an eyeball overlooking us. And it was right next to where I took the carcass picture. And it's very interesting. Half the people said it's just a leaf, and then half the people said it's an eyeball, Connor. So I guess check it out on my Instagram and on the Honey Island Swamp chapter in my book. But definitely I advise everybody to make your way to the Honey Island Swamp, because it is sacred ground and it's a spiritual experience. And if you're into anything paranormal or cryptid, it is like heaven. It's oasis, and it's only like 40 minutes from New Orleans. So when you go do all the voodoo and see all the haunted bars, check out the tour. 40 minutes, go check out Lake Pontchartrain as well. It's a lake that has had like 7 planes crash into it, and a bunch of dead bodies show up. That whole region, that whole swamp area is spooky. That's all I have to say.
You're all right, Connor. So if I understand this correctly, almost everyone else on the boat is ready to feed the fish, and they can't wait to get away from that nasty carcass, and you're begging the captain to go closer to it.
Yeah, it was so funny. And I was alone on the boat too, because I was meeting my friend Adam from Ohio and his family in Biloxi, and we had a miscommunication, and I was there a whole day early. So I went to New Orleans and the Honey Island Swamp by myself and did this huge haunted hunt by myself. And yeah, I was hanging over the edge, and I had time to kill, so I spent time with the captain for like an hour after, and hung out in the shop and got all the stories. Man, it was a bucket list. It was like a vacation within a vacation. It was so fun.
It sounds like everyone else was hanging over the side of the boat too, but for a different reason though.
Away from me.
Yeah, or away from that nasty carcass.
Yeah, no, yeah, away from the nasty carcass. And I definitely raised awareness, though, of the Honey Island swamp monster. Like, everybody on that tour definitely left with, like, a fun love for the creature, you know? It was like, oh, we're looking for it. And we also saw these giant big hogs, and we could smell them from, like, 100 yards away before I even got a visual on them. And my alarms were going off because I was like, oh, my God, it's around us. It's somewhere. Then we saw those two giant hogs, and they smelled really bad, too, when they're digging in that mud.
Well, I'm sure you're not the only one who's not going to ever forget that experience that day. That goes without saying. Huh. You just told us about the Honey Island Swamp experience, but you've spent quite a bit of time in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park as well. Did you have any unusual experiences there?
Well, one time when we were walking to Buttermilk Falls, well, when you go to Cuyahoga Valley National Park, the main thing is you check out Brandywine Falls, the tallest major waterfall in Ohio. Well, you check out that, and then you drive about 5 minutes to Blue Hen. And the Blue Hen is like 2 minutes down the trail, really easy to find. But Buttermilk is like an unknown one that's about 25 minutes down the creek. And our very first time out there, we didn't really know what to expect. And me and Jake, again, with our ancient tribal energy, trying to absorb it, bring it out there. And we're walking down the creek for about 15 minutes, and we smell something putrid, just horrible. And we're looking for it in the creek, you know, just splashing around. We think it's like a dead fish, so we're just looking around, maybe a dead raccoon. And we couldn't smell anything, or couldn't find anything, but we could still smell it, just taking us over, intoxicating. And we just keep walking. We give up on it, and then we finally make it to the waterfall. And we're shooting music videos and taking pictures and just laying in the water. Like, we found it. This is exactly what we worked for. And then we hear some weird sounds, like way back in the woods, and we don't think anything of it. Like, we knew that there was mountain lions in the area and coyote, and the peninsula python is a local legend, but we weren't really sweating it. But now that I look back, I think that something was tracking us the whole time while we were walking down the water, and then they just realized that we were just checking out the waterfall, but we didn't get a visual or anything. But and then when we walked back, no smell. So that's what really alarmed, that it wasn't like something dead or stationary. So just the combination of everything was very strange, but nothing too threatening. But we've also had a lot of strange occurrences after dark that weren't really cryptid-like. It was more ghosts, because there's an abandoned cemetery out in Helltown, and Helltown exists in Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and it's like the real life Silent Hill, like the real life Resident Evil. There's government conspiracy about a chemical spill that caused mutants. There's a hearse that will chase you out of town. There's abandoned barns that will allure you in, and you can never escape. So there's a bunch of scary stories, and it's awesome. It's the road to the end of the world. It's all the lore that's like right up my alley, you know. But we've went out in the middle of the night and went in these cemeteries and did seances with this one girl that was a Wicca. And we had really strange occurrences out there. And now that I look back at like Missing 401 and these Dogman things, that I don't know if I would have been messing around with that stuff. You know, not, I definitely wouldn't be messing with it now. But just the whole area, when you step into the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, you feel it. the grass man is home there, and mountain lions and other strange things, and just weird people. When you're miles into the woods, you don't know who or what is surrounding you.
Oh yeah, dogmen aren't the only thing you have to watch out for in the woods, so yeah, you're right there. You heard that a lot of people had a lot of strange experiences with cryptids after a hurricane that happened not too long ago. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, man. I live down in Calhoun County now in the Panhandle of Florida, and in 2018, Hurricane Michael came by, and it was one of the most devastating storms to ever hit America, and more than 70 people died, and it really bothered me. It tore my trailer up and did thousands of dollars worth of damage, and then I luckily evacuated to my mom's house, which she just moved down to. It was her dream house. She had fruit trees on the property, reminded her of like home. She has a pond, and one by one, she watched all the trees fall, and the pecan trees fell, and it was terrible. And watched her bawl her eyes out, and watched her dream kind of crumble. But retrospect, looking back, now we have a blank canvas to paint with. If you still have life, you still have a chance. You still have an opportunity. But after that hurricane, we had so many strange occurrences throughout this area. They actually made a documentary on Amazon Prime called Spirits in the Storm. It's made by Dale Cox and 2 TV, and it talks about how everything was turned up by the storm, and that people were having ghost encounters and Bigfoot encounters. And then over by Bellamy Bridge, the frequencies were really turned up. But firsthand, in our trailer, we had multiple nights that we had banging, and then one night I was able to get my glasses on, like look outside. I saw like a group of dogs, and I don't think it was Dogman or anything, because there's literally like wild packs of dogs that are like 8 deep down here. And then after the storm, they were just running wild. But I don't know what happened on my trailer. It was very, very weird. But this old man fisherman that I talk to at my game store all the time, he lives at the Ocheesee Pond, and in the 1800s, the Ocheesee Pond wild man was captured by Civil War vets and Indian hunters and gatherers because it was abusing the land and harassing the women and children. So these men, they captured this creature and they took it to the Chattahoochee Hospital, and they thought it was an escaped lunatic, and he ended up dying 3 years later, and his body's buried out there right by the golf course, and everybody in this area knows about it. So when people talk about like Bigfoot not existing, I'm like, man, there's a body right out there if you really want to know. But the Ocheesee Pond is like sacred ground. Again, I know I keep saying that, but this is like Civil War battlefields, and Native Americans set up their civilizations right here. Like, they chose this for a reason. Like, I find arrowheads in my mom's backyard. Like, they use that same pond that I use. So it is sacred. It goes back to the beginning of time. It goes back to the beginning of all these legends. But the Ocheesee Pond wild man is one of the richest legends here, and his family still lurks around. And my buddy, who's an old school fisherman, him and his neighbor heard something trampling through the woods right on the side of their house one night. And they didn't get a visual on it or anything, but they said it sounded like the weight of a car trampling through, just ripping through all the trees that were all sideways and twisted. And it was horrific. After there was debris everywhere, and cyclones and twisters, and the woods were all ripped up. So I believe all the beings, panthers, dogman, pterodactyls, and Bigfoot, everything that lurks around these Florida swamps, had to rechange their thinking. It changed everything. But after the hurricane, going out to Bellamy Bridge, I was able to go out with my buddy Ronnie, who's a military veteran, and he has a plethora of experiences. He's seen a giant crab in a tree right by the same area that this man named Cody witnessed a dogman. And I actually interviewed him a couple weeks ago, and I put that on my Instagram as well. It's like a 5-minute quick interview right on the side of a gas station, because Ronnie told me he had this encounter, and I saw Cody walking on the side of the street a few times. I'm like, dude, I gotta interview him. I gotta hear his side of the story. And he ended up telling me about a dog man that him and his buddy saw that ended up rising to be taller than the telephone pole, the size of a tree. And then after a while, it vanished into a black dot into the sky. So I really think that's like a skinwalker shapeshifter, something with super abilities, something to be 30 feet tall and not extended like far out, like arms extended. This thing, he said the head of this thing was bigger than his body. So I don't know if he was hallucinating or put into a wild trance, but these dogman creatures have super abilities. So if they could be the size of clouds, then possibility is endless. Coincidence is the only thing to never exist. Anything is possible, and it is thrilling. But out in Bellamy Bridge with Ronnie, we go out there and we do meditation, and I smoke CBD, and we talk about old times, and we really try to soak it up. And we stay out there for hours on end. And with my GoPro camera, I got a loud hoot. And then about 20 to 40 minutes later, I lost track of time, I'm not sure, a tree crashes down right by us. And I took it as like an exact warning. I'm like, all right, it's time to go, guys. You guys, wore out your welcome. And it was just bone chilling. And that moment really pushed me to get a carry conceal license. I took the class like right after, just because I cannot keep going into the woods with a knife. I value my life too much, and I value exploring so much, so I have to find a balance. And I don't want to shoot anything, but I think these creatures will have a respect for you if you have a respect for them and you have a firearm. But there's so many variables, and luckily I'm still walking today, and I've been in a lot of sticky situations, and luckily I'm still here. But I'm very nervous every time I go out. Even when I take the trash out right here next to the school, I'm thinking about it, And recently, sadly, my cat Baby, we had her for like 10 to 12 years up in Ohio. She lived in Indiana with my mom. She lives right down the street from me here. My mom found her dead in her backyard, all torn apart. And that just tore me apart too. It really just threw me for a loop, because I started to question everything. I like myself, not like, oh, does Bigfoot Dogman exist? Yes, I already know they exist. I started questioning myself, like, did I make this happen? Should I stop researching this? Did my vibrations and manifesting my thoughts make all this happen? It really set me on a guilt trip. But I also realized that accidents happen, and sadly, with the current year, animals have been, moving into new areas, and I really don't know what killed my cat, but we set up trail cams and everything after, and we haven't had much experience or encounters since, and I'm very thankful. And I refuse to do like Bigfoot calls or tree snacks anywhere near my mom's property, just because I don't speak that language and I don't want to cause any more problems. And losing my cat was like one of the worst things ever, and it made me really like mad at the world. And I'm one that's like, I don't even like killing like spiders and flies and stuff. I'm like, oh, but I was so angry, and I was like, if it was a panther, or if it was an owl, or if it was a Bigfoot or a dogman or a cracked out neighbor, I don't know, but I just wanted vengeance, and it really set me up into a fire. But luckily I've balanced out, and I believe in heaven, and I know that my cat will be waiting for me up there, and everything that is good will be waiting for us when it's our time. And I believe that there are good dogman and good Bigfoot and good monsters out there as well. But there's definitely bad, and there's bad animals and bad people, and we got to walk the line of balance. That's for sure.
Well, it goes without saying, I'm so sorry to hear about you losing Baby like that. Yeah, that isn't easy. If anyone listening wants to buy a copy of one of your books, how can they do that?
My books are available on Amazon. My name is Connor Flynn, ConnorFlynn. And my first book is Eerie Swamps, Road Trip to Eden. Then my second book is Big Brother Bigfoot. And my third book that's available is Monsters and Mysteries Around the Corner. And all three of those, I really dig into local legends and lore that I've researched. But my first book is my baby. It's my journal. It's Erie Swamps Road Trip to Eden. So it talks about moving from Lake Erie down to the Florida swamps. And then the final chapter ends in Eden. And about 15 minutes from here is the Garden of Eden Trail, and it is sacred ground. I keep saying that, but trust me, man, it is sacred. It really is. 27 of the 28 trees that are in the Bible are in that park. Gopher wood that Noah used to build the ark is also known as Torrey. The only place that Torrey grows in the whole wide world is right there. And in the good book, it describes a delta that breaks into 4 rivers. Well, right there and Siberia are the only 2 examples in this known world. So, most of the fingers point to this being maybe a biblical place. And Stacy Brown and his father filmed some of the best thermal Bigfoot footage right across the river in Torrey State Park. So every time I go over there, it's something new. But one time, we were battling dehydration and witnessed a giant eastern diamondback rattlesnake on the trail. And I was with my neighbor and his 10-year-old son, and we were about a couple miles from the parking lot. So a bite would have been fatal because there are deep valleys and big riverbeds to climb through. Our lives flash before our eyes, and it really digs into a combination of everything between haunted prisons, crybaby bridges, wild lore near neighborhoods just like the Sleepy Hollow monsters, and then another ghost named White Shoes, that it was a little girl that she wasn't allowed to play at the playground, so all we could ever see were her white shoes behind the fence. And it was always a running gag, like when the basketball went over there, like, oh, watch out for White Shoes. So it's always just been in my blood. And it was about time. 2020 was my calling to finally get this out on paper. And I survived the 27 Club this year and got 3 of my books out, and I have 3 more coming in the first month of January. So I'm really running with this, and it's been a blast just because I'm so passionate about it from so many angles. Like, I've had my own encounters. I love history, and I also am big on like protecting others, because many people are vanishing from national parks and dense areas, and hunters are going missing without shooting a bullet off. So strange things are really happening, and if we watch the news, they're not really doing a good job of informing people. So it's up to people like you and me to, maybe raise awareness and just get the stories out. And knowledge is power. And I know that you've saved many lives over the years, and I just hope that I could help people and raise awareness.
Well, with all those books, it sounds like you're doing a good job of it, so keep doing what you're doing. Having said that, Connor, it's about time for us to get out of here, but before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Yeah. Well, one funny quick one would be, in my book, I have a picture of me holding the first metacarpal thumb bone of a giant. I am huge on the mound builders of America and the ancient lands of Europe too. There was an ancient race of people that Abraham Lincoln even wrote about. And I look back into time, and Adolf Hitler was into these strange things, and he was a really bad guy, but he was interested in the other side. And then Marco Polo, he wrote about encounters with dogman creatures. And then King Arthur was known to raise a werewolf army. So this stuff gets so crazy and has deep roots into our ancient history. I really think our history books should be writing about this. We've all heard about Little Red Riding Hood, but we need to really know about what the roots came from. And there's a cool Irish folklore about Connor and the farmer. he loses his cows and he goes looking for them all day, and he loses himself, and he finds a cabin, and they greet him in, and it's this old woman, and she turns into a wolf, and he sits down at this table, and these three men surround him, and they transform into wolves, and they start cackling, and he starts swinging a stick. He's furious. He's like freaking out. He thinks they're going to eat him alive. And then the alpha wolf comes in, and he says, "Hey, Connor, do you remember when you saved a young wolf with the thorn through its side?" He goes, "Yes, of course. I nursed him back to health." He goes, "Well, that was me, and this is my family." And the wolf admitted to taking the cow, but he said, "Blessing one is it by a good deed done." And Connor woke up the next morning, confused in his pasture, but he had bunch of new cows, and they ended up leading him to a successful life. So it's very interesting that these werewolves have ancient times and ties into our lore, and maybe that's why I was named Connor. Like, everything is so connected, and coincidence is the only thing that never exists, man. I'm big on energy is never created nor destroyed. We've always existed. Everything is connected. There's only one sky. There's one creator. We might have different interpretations and different religions, but we all die, we all bleed, and we were all born. And I think there's something special about that. And I think the bridge to our creator is right in the woods. And that's why there's such a big cover-up about it. Dogman, Bigfoot, Swamp Thing, Mothman, there's something to it. But I think it begins with the ancient race of giants that used to live in America. And the skeletons blanket America still. And I held the giant's bone right in my hand. So I don't have much time for people that say there's no evidence, because I felt the petrified bone. It was impressive, and it absorbed into me. So I feel like when I dream, when I get lost in daydream, when I meditate, when I fall asleep, when I'm pumped with adrenaline, I'm channeling those ancient vibrations. And I think everybody is, but they're just not in tune with it. I think everybody should just slow down and get in tune with your ancient abilities. Good things will happen. When you follow your need, when you follow your true path, all your needs will be met in abundance. I learned that when I was living out of my car, and I joined a punk rock musical that opened me in with wide arms and threw me into the Florida culture, and I became the Florida Swamp Thing and the country man ever since, and I've been running with it. So it's been an honor to chop it up with you, man, and I definitely appreciate you letting me come on and ramble on about my crazy cryptid experiences, man. It's super bone chilling and sends goosebumps up my spine to relive some of these occurrences. But other ones were a little bit more chill, But that's the thing. Sometimes you don't ask for it, and it will come knocking right on your door. It will.
Connor, thank you so much for coming on and sharing those experiences with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate it too.
You're welcome. Thanks again so much. Have a great night. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.